This is NLPS Ed Talks, a podcast brought to you by Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools. I'm Dale Burgos, the Executive Director of Communications, and I'll be sharing conversations with students, staff, and friends of the district. We'll learn, we'll laugh, we may cry, but most importantly, we'll share the unique stories of individuals that work and play in our school system. Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools is one of many school districts in British Columbia, Canada, and is centrally located in one of the most beautiful places in the world, Vancouver Island. Thanks for joining us. Kate Russell, welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of NLPS Ed Talks. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So let's do a quick introduction here. So Kate, tell me where you are. You're new to the district, correct?
Yes, I am the new principal of Gabriola Elementary School, and I'm new to Nanaimo. My daughter and I have been here for about 4 months.
Fantastic. And welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Very
happy to have you here. Gabriel is a beautiful place.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, the people there are amazing. Mm-hmm. It's pretty special to be working on there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Good.
The sense of community there is phenomenal.
That's right. And I know of, I'm new to Nanaimo about 5 years ago, and I know of Gabriel having a lot of great people, of course, beautiful scenery, and the artists on the island.
Yeah.
Right?
Lots of art, and we have community artists come in and do art with the kids after school, and so it's a pretty amazing place.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, you said you're new to Nanaimo, but you're not new to the island. So where I always like to start on these podcasts is get to know the people that work here in the district. So let's start right at the very beginning. Where are you from?
I'm from Regina, Saskatchewan. I was born and raised there, and when I was 13, my family moved to Victoria.
Wow. Okay. So Regina, I'm from Winnipeg. I should point that out. So you and I know what the prairies are like and what it's like in winter.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right? Yeah. Do you miss those winters?
I don't, actually, not at all. My family, when we moved here, they were looking, my mom and dad were definitely looking to get away from the winters. They were both, small town Saskatchewan, brought up and raised. And Victoria seemed like a good option.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's going west as far as you can, right?
Yeah.
And Victoria is the place to be. You mentioned small town Saskatchewan. What small towns were they from?
My mom was from Wolseley and my dad was from Wilkie.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. There you go. Well, that's exciting. So then now you're 13 years old. You moved to Victoria. How does that play out? How does that feel?
It didn't feel good at the time. I was kind of angry. How could you make me move away from my friends?
Of course,
but it was the best move possible.
Okay.
I love Victoria, growing up around the ocean and just, being out on my bike with my friends and exploring, camping. Yeah, it was a really good move.
That's fantastic. And we're feeling the same way. Once we moved out here, you look out the window, you see the mountains, you see the water. It's like, I think we're good.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
we made the right decision. What part of Victoria did you all move to?
We moved to Oak Bay.
Oak Bay, beautiful place.
Yes.
Yeah, right on the water.
Block away
Close
from the water. So when I first moved here and I was, not feeling so happy, I would just go down to the ocean and listen to the waves.
Yes.
And that always made me feel better.
I bet it did. No kidding. Now, why the big move? I mean, were the parents, was it for work? Was it for pleasure?
It was for work. My dad had started Child and Youth Services in Saskatchewan and was approached to work in either Ottawa or Victoria for the Ministry of Health. And Ottawa has winter, so we chose Victoria.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Not a bad choice.
Yeah, very
for sure.
good choice.
Okay. And then now that you're out here, 13 years old, starting high school, I'm assuming then in Oak Bay?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
So started grade 9 at Oak Bay High, which was tough because Oak Bay started at grade 8. And so, kids who came from different feeder schools had already formed their friendship groups and stuff like that. But it was okay. I liked Oak Bay. It was a good academic and sports school. And so by grade 12, I had solidified friendships that have lasted my whole life.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now you mentioned grade 12. That's a perfect segue. So you've graduated from Oak Bay. What do you do next? What does one decide?
Well, I graduated when I was 17.
Okay.
I'm a late birthday, so I took a year off and I worked at Bag of Pasta and decided that, no, that was not the life for me. And so I ended up moving to Quebec City and beginning a French for non-Francophones course, I had been in French immersion from kindergarten to grade 8.
Nice.
And went out there, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and found out I didn't have grade 13, so I couldn't actually take French as a second language.
Right.
Ended up in Cégep for a semester and did things like philosophy and psychology and sociology all in French. I did not pass the philosophy course, although it was a 60%, but out there that wasn't enough.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe I got 59 and a pass was 60. I don't know. Came home for 4 months,
Okay.
worked, and said, no, this really isn't for me. Went back, did another term in Cégep, and then did a year of French as a second language degree.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And because of that French, is that why you wanted to go to Quebec?
Yes.
Okay, so I see. That's a great place to go.
Yeah.
For French, right?
Yeah.
There you go. But you talk about winters and how you didn't like that growing up. So Quebec has some crazy winters.
They do, actually. But at that time, I was still young enough that the cold didn't bother me yet, right?
Yeah,
As
okay.
we get older, it becomes a little bit more hard to manage, I guess. And Quebec City just seemed like a bit of a dream,
Yes.
just with the history of our country. And, you know, so living in Quebec City was amazing. I lived in the Vieux-Québec, and you know, I would walk out of my apartment and it would just be the walls of the old city and the old lighting. And it just seemed like
amazing.
you were walking back into a different century. And yeah, so I just went to explore.
I bet you did. And so I'm assuming your French immersion came in handy, obviously, moving
Absolutely.
out there. Yep,
Yeah.
for sure. Okay. Once you were done there, what did you decide on next?
Well, I decided that I couldn't really do much with the French as a second language degree.
okay.
And I had always wanted to be a teacher, and I don't know where or why I had gotten off that path. And so I went back to Regina, to the University of Regina, and started a French immersion education degree. But after a year, decided I didn't want to do French immersion. Not quite sure why.
Okay.
It's the longest Bachelor of Education story ever.
Okay. We got
And
time.
so ended up switching into the Bachelor after degree program because I had so many courses already. And so I ended up getting Bachelor of Ed in secondary, core French, and social studies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. And so you went to U of R for how many years was that then?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. And then you're done.
And then I'm done.
Got your degree?
Yeah.
What was next after that?
Went back home to Victoria,
Okay.
moved in with mom and dad, and went back to working at the restaurant I had been working at off and on throughout my university career.
Oh, okay.
And started applying for jobs and ended up getting the first job I applied for, full-time position teaching core French in Coola.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that, hey. So was that, were you wanting to get out of Victoria, or you just put your feelers out just
I just wanted a job.
okay, there
Yeah.
you go. And how beautiful is it out there?
It is God's country. It's just
Yeah.
so phenomenally gorgeous. But I still remember driving up there with my mom and dad. They took me up there, right? I had no vehicle and just out of university and, you know, going down the hill, as it's called,
Right.
which is like 10,000 feet drop in 21 kilometers.
Really?
And it's like 13 switchbacks and
Oh my.
19% or 14% grade, gravel road, single lane. Like it was crazy. And
Wow.
as we're driving down, well, as my dad is driving down, white knuckled all the way, right? Like grinding on the brakes.
Right.
We were listening to Patsy Cline falling off the edge of the
come
world
on.
or something. Like it was just so random and it was so perfect. And
Oh, no.
yeah, but the Coola Valley has a place in my heart, always will. Stayed there for 6 years.
Okay, I've never been, and I'd like to go.
Yeah.
For sure. So 6 years.
Yeah.
Out there, stuck with the French immersion program, obviously, right? Yeah.
Well, taught core French,
Yep.
taught social studies,
Yes.
taught lots of things actually. Taught math, taught First Nations 11-12 when it first started as
Oh,
a
wow.
course, taught choir to grade 4s. I sort of, you know, working in small communities and small schools, you end up being a jack of all trades.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. No kidding. But that's great, though.
Yeah.
Then you get a feeling for what's really your niche or what you're feeling, right? Mm-hmm. So then after Bella Coola, where did you head over to?
I went to the West Kootenays.
Okay.
And I ended up in Nelson, and I taught at two different schools, Blewett Elementary and St. Joseph's School, and I did core French at both of those for 1 year. And then I ended up in the Slocan Valley teaching band and French and social studies. So nobody had applied for the band job.
Okay.
And the superintendent of the day looked at my resume and saw that I had lots of musical background. I was in choirs and I played cello for 10 years growing up.
Wow.
And so I had like this musical background, and he said, I'm sure you'd be able to do it. And so I went to the band teacher at St. Joseph's and said, can you help me? And she gave me a clarinet and taught me how to play it. And then I taught myself how to play all the other instruments, at least a little bit.
Right.
And ended up teaching band for 5 years, not just in Slocan, but also in Castlegar and Robson and in Egypt.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Right. Because so you've told me that you worked in how many, you taught in small communities around BC?
For 9 years.
Yeah. Okay. And so it ranged from all over Bella Coola, West Kootenays, you said Castlegar, Nelson, all those areas.
Yeah.
And then Egypt. So there you go. So now you're going, okay, well, you moved from the east, you went west, you went back east to Quebec, and then now you've gone really far.
Yeah.
Now, what brought you out to Egypt?
At the time, I was kind of going through, a personal change, and a friend of mine that I was working with saw an ad in the Vancouver Sun for a BC offshore school in Cairo. And it was in its second year of being open, going into, and he said, why don't we apply? And I said, sure, why not, right? Egypt, the cradle of civilization.
Right.
Who wouldn't want to go there in a BC offshore school? And so a few friends of mine and I applied, and I got the job.
Look at that.
And so off I went to Egypt.
Boy. And did you know anybody else that went along
luckily, another one of my friends got a job as well. And
right.
so she and I went off to Egypt. It was BC offshore school, BC curriculum. And from kindergarten to grade 9, the first year, I think we had about 50 kids.
Okay.
And so there were about 9 or 10 of us on staff. And it was just an eye-opener of an experience.
I bet it was. No kidding.
You go with this idea of Egypt, right? The pyramids, you see all of the pictures with like the dunes in the background.
Right.
Well, no, they take that from a very specific angle. I'm just going to say that.
I've seen those pictures. You're right.
Yeah.
You think that it's just sand all around the pyramids.
You're right in the middle of Giza, right? Like there's Pizza Hut and KFC right across the street from the pyramids.
Kind of takes away from it, doesn't it?
It does, a little bit, yeah.
No kidding.
But it's amazing. And I ended up spending 5 years there between two different times.
Okay.
So first year there, principal up and leaves. At Christmas doesn't come back. Oh. Which was interesting. And so I kind of picked up the reins for a couple of weeks until we got a new principal. Right. And Egypt kind of was my first step into moving towards more an administration position.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I ended up being lead teacher, so kind of liaison between the family that owned the school and the administration. The principal dealt with a lot of culture shock, right? Like we used to talk around the fact that October you would kind of hit that culture wall, and just providing supports around that, because it is a very different place.
Right.
Like it's loud, it's busy,
culturally obviously very different.
Yes, and women are not seen the same way there as they are in the Western world, right? Yep. Like first year there or second year setting up a new classroom, that they're untrained workers come in, they're going to put up a whiteboard on the wall, and I'm trying to tell them, like, use a stud finder, find a stud, put the screws into a stud, and they look at you like, you are a woman, you know nothing, right? And they put it up. It fell down in 2 hours. They came back the next day. with a stud finder, put it into the
Nicely
studs.
done, Kate.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it's just a totally different world over there.
I bet it
literally.
is. No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's go back a little bit here. I mean, you've jumped on a flight to a place that you've never been to before, right?
Yes.
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And I mean, what's your thoughts going? Like, what are the thoughts going through your head? Because there are going to be students that are listening to this potentially that are thinking that they'd like to try something as well and go and go somewhere different, right? What got you through that whole mentality phase and then getting you over to Egypt?
Well, having parents that were supportive and who had already traveled in the Middle East, had already been to Egypt,
Nice.
definitely helped, right? Because a lot of their friends were like, how can you let your daughter go there? It's so dangerous. And they were more wise and understood that a lot of the media coverage is very biased and very skewed.
Right.
And having a friend go with me definitely helped, right? Knowing who my roommate was going to be and that we had already lived, as roommates in Canada before we left. So that was good. And just the sense of adventure. I really love travel. I had always wanted to travel. And so this was my opportunity to just sort of jump off and see the world.
What an opportunity it was, right? So now explain a little bit what a BC offshore school is for those that won't know, and what does that look like? Who attends the school?
So BC Offshore School just means that they have gone through a process with the Ministry of Education here and have the right to offer our curriculum overseas. At this school, it's a for-profit school, so people pay tuition. It's a private school, but all of the kids were Egyptian. And so, more often from affluent families, Egyptians who want their children to be educated in a system that will allow them to then go to universities in the UK or the US or Canada, right? So they're generally more open-minded, and want their children to see a different way of being.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And not much different from our international students that come here in our district.
Absolutely.
Same idea, right? So now while you're out there, you've told me that you've traveled quite a bit. Now that you've got the travel bug and you've made it this far, you hit up a number of countries in 6 years' time. Maybe you don't have to name them all off unless you remember them all, but how many countries was that?
I think I did about 14 countries in 6 years.
Okay.
So places like Ethiopia, Nigeria, South Africa, Botswana, Oman, Jordan. I also lived in the United Arab Emirates, Greece a couple of times, France, England, Mexico. Yeah.
Now, I mean, well, while you're out, you're out there already, you Middle East or wherever that you've landed. It seems that traveling amongst those countries in the Middle East or in Europe or Asia, it seems to be a lot easier since you're out there. Is that the case? I mean, I hear when people go and visit, they're like, well, I'm going to hit up 5 countries in 3 weeks. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's so much easier because, and especially in the Middle East, in Egypt, you're kind of in the middle of all of those areas, right? So it's easy to jump off to Europe. It's 3 or 4 hours at the most.
Right.
Going to Asia, instead of 16 hours, it's more like 8. Right. So it's just easier. And although a lot of people look at Egypt and say Middle East, it is part of Africa.
Right.
And so it does afford you the opportunity to travel that way as well.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Any challenges while you're out there? I mean, you hear the stories, and it's sometimes, like you said, some scary pieces or scary stories that you hear in the news. But not getting into too much detail. But I mean, how was that out there?
There were certainly times when there were bombs.
Oh, wow.
There was one time when I think it was my first or second year there that there was a bomb in the big open air market, Khana Khalili, and there was some tourists who ended up being killed in that. And that's a little scary because, you know, we used to go to Hanakhalili every other weekend, just go wander around, go shop. We had our leather guy, we had our shoe guy, we had our spice guy, right?
Yes.
And so those kinds of things are a bit scary. The first year we lived there, we lived in Heliopolis, which is traditional Arabic community. Not a lot of expats who lived there.
Okay.
And sometimes we would get followed or stuff like that,
Right.
just because we were kind of new and they weren't used to seeing a lot of white people in that
Gotcha.
area.
Yep.
And so there's things like that you just kind of have to be really aware and watch. Before moving there, cell phone wasn't really a part of my life, but after moving there, my cell phone was my lifeline, and I would just call up, you know, one of the family who owned the school and be like, I'm in a cab and I want to go here. Can you tell the cab driver? And they
nice.
would, you know, tell them. This was kind of pre-Google Translate
Of course,
and all
yep.
of that. So, yeah, there were definitely times. And when I was back the second time with my daughter, who at the time we moved there was 2, and when we came back was 4, it was starting to destabilize again. They had devalued the Egyptian pound in order to get the IMF fund loan. And there were some bombings in Maadi, which is the expat area.
Oh.
It was getting closer to home. That's
Right.
where we lived. And so that's when I decided it was time to come back to BC for good.
Okay. All right. Before we move on, though, from your move back to BC, you mentioned that you got married in Cairo.
I did.
You have a story around that.
Yes. So
Okay.
I met my daughter's dad,
Okay.
and he's Nigerian.
Okay.
And so because we're both expats, we had to get married at the Minister of Justice in downtown Cairo.
Okay.
So imagine me being all excited, and I got a white dress made, and, you know, he was in his suit and everyone was dressed up, and I had a little bouquet of flowers, and yeah,
Nice.
I'm getting
Oh,
married.
awesome.
And you end up in this scuzzy, dirty building downtown. Everyone else is in jeans and like ripped up stuff, and you're not allowed to take pictures because it's a government building.
Oh, okay.
And so when it's our turn, we go into what is essentially a closet at the back end of a long, dirty hallway. And there's
no.
man sitting behind a desk, chain smoking with like a ashtray overflowing
like a
on his
movie.
desk. It
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
totally. And my friend and I kind of weren't really a part of it because, well, I'm a woman. And so they asked a whole bunch of questions of my husband. And we had a translator there to help us with it, although my husband did speak Arabic.
Okay.
And in the end, I put my thumbprint on a bunch of different contracts, signed my name, and apparently I was married.
So not the traditional sense of
No.
standing in front. Oh, my goodness.
Not
Interesting.
even remotely. And so
Wow.
after that, we went back and we had like a big celebration
Great.
at my apartment, and
There you
all
go.
the friends and stuff came. But yeah, it was definitely something I will never forget.
No kidding. Very different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I said it had the makings for a movie. Just very different.
Yeah.
I did not know where that story was going to go.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, now you mentioned that you had your admin role, your first taste of it in Cairo, and then you of course you had your daughter, and you got married out in Cairo, but then you've moved back to BC now. So what did you do when you came back?
So my husband got his permanent residence. We had been in the UAE for 3 years. And so we moved back. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I got a job at Queen Margaret's School in Duncan. And so there I taught English, ESL, socials, French, sort of the gamut. But I was back on the island.
Of course, yes.
And so that was really happy for me. I was happy to be close to my family again. And got pregnant within a couple of months of being back. So taught a year, went on mat leave, had my daughter, went back to work, and was there for 3 years. in total.
Fabulous. Okay.
Yeah.
So daughter was born in Duncan.
In Duncan.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. There you go. Excellent. So there for 3 years. Did you stick her? And is that where you were before you came here, or where were you before?
No. So after that, I got contacted by the family in Egypt, and they said, "Do you want to come back and be our elementary vice principal?"
Oh.
And I had been trying, dabbling, looking around BC to try and get an admin job, and wasn't having any luck. So I said, "Sure, why not?" And I moved back to Cairo with my daughter.
Look at that.
And so, there's not very many kids that get to say they lived in Cairo from ages 2 to 4.
Right.
And so I went back there and got thrown in sort of trial by fire as far as elementary vice principal. I had about 450 kids, about 20 staff.
Okay.
And they gave me my start. Really in admin.
Nice.
And then from there, once the bombing started happening again,
right. So we're going. Okay, yes.
Then my daughter and I moved to Elkford, BC, which is southeast corner by Sparwood or Fernie. Most people know Fernie.
Everyone knows Fernie,
yeah.
Right? Now, but the same sort of topography, I'm assuming, right? So you're living in the mountains area or around there?
Yeah, we were at like 4,400 feet in the mountains, so quite high up.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for winter to last 8+ months there. So we went from one extreme to another, right? From the desert and 35 degrees almost all the time to, as my daughter called it, Elsa Land. With
is this around Frozen time?
Yeah,
okay,
it absolutely was.
Okay.
So
thank you, Disney.
It was mountains and snow, and
that's so funny.
And she got introduced to all of the things that go along with that. So sledding was a big part of our life.
Yeah,
and
sure.
She did figure skating last year and moved up 4 levels in 1 year. Like, she's crazily sporty.
Okay.
And we had a little local ski hill that was usually open about 2 months of the year. And so we were skiing, and so she got to do all of those kinds of things, and she got to be a kid and ride her bike down the street. And
yes, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So does she have a preference? I mean, obviously not comparable, but between the two, I mean, what is her feeling?
Between Nanaimo and Elkford?
Elkford and going back to Cairo. So, because that's basically what she's experienced so far, right?
Yes. She would definitely choose Elkford.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, in Cairo, like, it's hard to be a kid, right? Because there's so much traffic, and it's so dangerous, and you can't just walk, and you certainly can't ride a bike, and so
that's right.
Getting to be a kid and play with her friends out in the street and stuff like that, right? Because Elkford's 1,500 people. Like, it's a small community.
Small town. Yeah, no kidding. But tight, I'm sure, right?
Very.
Okay, so Elkford, and then where did you go after that?
Here.
Oh, there you go. Well, welcome.
And now we're back in Nanaimo. Yeah.
Full circle. So there you go. Well, let's chat a little bit now that we're talking about Nanaimo, and you're here, and you're at Gabriel Elementary, as we all know, K-7 school.
Yes.
How's that going for you? First couple months, how does it feel?
It feels great. It's been a bit of a whirlwind.
I bet.
Definitely a steep learning curve, as this is my first principalship. But I think that Gabriola and I are well suited to each other.
Why is that?
I like small community schools.
Perfect.
That's where I did most of my teaching when I was in the public system before going overseas. I like making the connections with the kids and seeing them grow from year to year and change, and you really get to build those relationships and just getting to know the community.
Right.
So, yeah, the staff is great. The kids are awesome.
Right.
And my daughter goes there, so
that's fabulous.
For the first time she's at my school. And so that's really special in and of itself. And just spending time getting to know the kids and getting in the classrooms and figuring out how to support my staff and students and community.
That's fabulous. Now, moving forward, looking a couple years down the road, what's the plan for Gabriola for you?
Gabriola, I see myself being there probably 4 or 5 years for sure.
That's great.
And we're really working on becoming sort of we're working on outdoor learning, looking at reconciliation through land-based learning.
Nice.
We're partnering with Simon Fraser University and have a 3-year project going forward with them where we have people coming in and observing and looking at how we can build that connection again between the Snuneymuxw First Nations and Gabriola.
Awesome. I love it. I love that connection. How did Simon Fraser get involved in all of this?
So there was teacher Kate Reynolds who taught at Gabriola for a lot of years.
Okay.
And she put forward some more local grants around outdoor learning and connections with the land.
Okay.
And that sort of built into a larger grant through the province, which partnered with Dr. Mark Fetties from the SFU project.
Okay.
And they together have moved forward into a very large project around land-based learning and reconciliation on Gabriola.
Okay, there you go. And that's in line with a lot of the work that we're doing now as a district through the Sayayetsis framework, right? It's perfect timing.
It is.
Kismet.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I mean, they're very lucky to have you. It sounds as if you are a perfect fit. From talking to you today, it really does seem like you're at a good place and you're in the right place.
Yes, I am in the right place.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good. Was there anything else that you maybe want to share moving forward? What any big plans?
I just look forward to growing and building on all of the good work that's already happening in our school and, building those connections among staff and getting more involved in land-based learning and place-based learning and getting our kids outside.
That's key, right? Get some fresh air, kids.
That's right.
Well, good. Kate, thanks so much for coming down. This has been a great half hour. Look at that. Can you believe that? It's been half an hour that we started this conversation. Like I said, congratulations for your first principalship. We're happy to have you here in the district.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, have yourself a good day.
You too.